Welcome back to round two for the Landscape and Environments project. So in this section, I've got my reference photo that I've picked out over here on the side, and I'm going to be mostly using this for my color references. But there's also some cool compositional things that are going on within this that I really like and appreciate. I think that the shape of the ground here, the various rocks with the grass interstrewn to it, as well as the flatter plane that's happening up at the top is all really pretty successful. I like the tree without any leaves that's kind of hanging over there. I think there's some room to be able to improve upon that, and we can likely do a little bit more with the landscape happening over the cliff here instead of just leaving it clouds. But overall, it's a pretty successful painting. So I'm going to start sketching this, and hopefully this is useful for you guys for how to think about building your painting. I'll also at the end of this video start blocking in the sky. So if you happen to not have watched the first one for the series, I highly recommend you go back and do that. I talk in depth about what makes for a successful landscape painting and how to be able to work your way through them. I'm going to be using all those same tricks. So there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on within this composition that's helping to build the viewer's eye and attention towards it. So let me just start sketching, make sure I've got my smoothing turned on my brush. I've got my canvas set up here. It is 20 by 20. 20 by 20 with 150 DPI on there. All right. Smoothing. So 150 DPI. I'm going to turn my brush down. You can see how small my brush really is that I'm painting with here. Nice thin line, so I've got room to be able to iterate with the paintings. Let's go in, start just getting my initial sketches. One thing that I can certainly do here is push up those shapes and those volumes quite a bit more. Right. So just like there's got this nice ridge that's coming around. I like that dissipates within this section. Got some strong rocks that are happening. And then we're going to bring it on over. So let's see, they've got another dead branch that's helping to really fill that negative space in a strong way. These types of rock formations are always really cool. I don't think we have too many of these here in the state of Georgia. And then we've got the cliff face going on underneath it. Got some room to be able to that up a little bit more. I like that. We've got this ridge and then sort of the stair step that's going on. Keep that open. I'm not working on my typical Wacom tablet. I'm working on my laptop screen tonight. My other computer's having a little bit of issues going on. Not sure entirely what's up with that. But we've got, now that I've got my overall ridge structure going on, bring that in. Don't forget about the tree forms they've put within this section. I think that's a really nice, valuable touch. I don't want to forget about those. But we've got a human or man-made element that we need to build into this piece. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. Let's work the background a little bit. So now that I've got my ridge poking up a little bit higher, it's quite a bit more on a slant. And I said I wanted to add more to the round section. So let's start the mountains here, and then we can build them up a little bit higher. Plenty of room for the sky within this piece. I think that's another nice touch. One thing I like about the reference image is how gray those clouds get up at the very top, so that it almost creates a vignette as we are looking at the paintings. A little bit of cloud coverage that's going on. We want everything to take place and is leading our attention to this section of the composition right now. I'm going to still leave a little bit of room for negative space within this piece up at the top. so it's not jutting quite up against it as much. But let's just go in and create a river. Moving through, we'll do some forest shapes. This will be a big old forest right around here, and open it up to some fields, farmland. More trees right within here, and then more trees as we get off into the mountains and have them dissipate up. So we'll still have some of that fog, but I actually want to fill in that portion of the scene just a little bit more. And then our cloud forms, we want to make sure that they are helping to move the viewer's attention and eyes over to what we want them to look at. So I'm using the rule of thirds there just to be able to block in shapes. All right, so that'll be kind of where my cloud coverage is going to go. And we got a nice, really rough sketch here. You can see that with my reference image, when you guys are sharing out your progress, please make sure that you include your reference image so we get an idea of maybe some of those other details if they're not showing up in the initial sketch. This is a really loose and rough sketch here, but got plenty of other stuff that'll start to develop as I block in my colors. So now, what type of structure to put within this? I like the idea of adding sort of a ranger station or a tower. I think that looks cool. So it's sort of, you're already up high, but you're getting even higher up to be able to look out at all the things that are out there. And then we can make the ranger station just a little bit more interesting, maybe a little bit more modern. It's a bean. Please make sure that you're working on your perspective and trying to get that looking correct. All right, so that's a pretty good ultra modern shape. The ranger station, I like that. Give it a little bit of a handrail coming out in front of it. And we'll make it like there's a little overhang as you climb up into it. So it's sort of like a little kid's treehouse. You guys have a treehouse, and with the sun coming from the background like that, I think that should look pretty neat. Pretty cool looking little bean structure there. Maybe give it a satellite dish for being back in the day, so it can communicate whatever it is it needs to say, and then we'll give it some more wiring and just electronic elements that break up the super ultra modern section on this guy. So we got a nice little power switch down there at the bottom so that it's turned on. Maybe some other little antennas. So, yeah, that's good form and shape for this. I like the positioning for where things are. Yeah, man. All right, so that's a good start for my sketch. I'm gonna just hit Control E with those layers selected and label it my sketch. Because I'm going to be working with blues right here from the beginning of this painting, I'm going to go in and do a color overlay on that sketch just so that I can continue to see it. All right, it'll be in red for now. All right, so let's get this thing started. Like I said, I always like to begin in the very background here. So I'm going to work underneath my sketch at first and work really loose as I start to build into the details on this painting. All righty. So for there, what I just did was I grabbed one of my random colors here, pretty arbitrarily within the background. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to use that same eyedropper and pick one of the more saturated blues up at the top. I can always go back and edit these colors towards the end. All right, we'll use the pastel blue. See how that works for me. Let's drop the opacity down. I want to turn my smoothing back on. 20%. So we're working at 50%, so I won't get the pure tone right away. But one of the cool things that's going on, we talked about the gradients in the previous video. You'll notice within a lot of your reference images for the landscapes that the colors get less saturated. They become less blue as you move closer to the horizon line. This is the idea that you're seeing even further away, and things are becoming more saturated as they move closer to the foreground. Wow, that looks really gray, doesn't it? It's not much of a blue at all. All right, so I think the pastel Palooza that I'm using maybe has a little bit too much texture. Here we go. All right. Chip brush is also really great for this project to get you away from using just that standard out of the box round brush. This will help me block in some of these forms and shapes really, really quick. So what I'm looking for here in the beginning, Photoshop has this bad habit of creating these extra line artifacts. And digital artists have come up with, kind of embracing those lined artifacts in a really unique way. We just sort of rock and roll with them and accept them. All right, next up, I'm going to grab a blue right from the center of this composition, and that is not much more blue than what I was working with before at all. But instead of just using the airbrush and creating a gradient throughout this entire sky, what I'm doing is I actually want to grab and create some brush work with my chip brush and the way that I'm painting through these sky shapes. And this is going to start to make stuff look quite a bit better. So now you can see me going over it, and I'm creating just some color variation to the sky. So let's get a little bit closer now to that bottom color. We should see, yeah, less of a difference here. I'm going to turn down my opacity even more. There we go. So now I can really start to paint in the blending. I've still got clouds that I'm gonna put over all this stuff, but you can see that I'm getting a rhythm is the most important part for me, a rhythm for the colors that I'm working with and creating. I can likely go, you see over there on the right-hand side of the reference image, things are getting even lighter within that space. But yeah, we got some good grays that we're starting to paint in here. Still doesn't feel quite as saturated as it looks like, but I suppose that's a trick of kind of color theory in the way that all these colors are coming together. So this one, wow, that's got a lot more yellow in it. Over on this side, we're going to be painting a pretty interesting composition. Now we've got some clouds to work in right after this. Go ahead and start pulling in some of those yellow tones. Feel like my eyes are getting more adjusted to this color scheme now. All right, so that's good for initial blocking of the colors for my sky background. I'll likely go back with the smudge tool and soften up some of those edges, but I want to keep it moving. And the next thing that I'm going to do is start pulling in some of those middle tones from the clouds. So again, I want to start just with my darkest color and then work my way towards the highlights. We should see some nice clouds start to show up here in just a minute. All right, I think the charcoal brush should work pretty well for me. And this is a great guide for how to be able to approach these clouds. So we're at 100% right now, and get my smoothing back on, opacity 66. That'll work for me. And let's just start hashing in some of these clouds. I'm working on a fresh layer here, and again, I'm at 50%. I do not want to go all the way up to 100 to commit so that I'm getting a little bit of a fuzzy edge, and then I also have the ability to be able to still darken some of this stuff up as I move forward. So I'm just roughing these fellas in here where my initial shape was. I haven't forgotten about that initial shape, but I am not entirely locked into it within this painting. Let's go ahead and let's get this one as well. Nice and loose. Now let's grab one of my darkest colors from where the highlights are at within this painting. Get my brush quite a bit larger just to speed up this process. Notice that I'm painting behind. Oops, lost my highlights. Sorry, that's what I get for trying to be fancy and not lifting up my brush. Yeah, so I want some of those highlights within the clouds to still exist. There we go. Wait for my little laptop to catch up. 5 years still seems to be the extreme upper limit for any laptop that you buy. When I got this guy 5 years ago, he was a beast, and he has just slowly been slowing down on me. All right, so now we've got some different colors for those clouds up in the top of the composition. So wherever I'm leaving those open chips before, I want to be sure to fill those in. So those shapes, make sure that my shape language is working well, feels interesting to me. Okay, there we go. Still got some holes going on in our clouds. Just want to fill those in. And clouds are so much fun to do because you end up finding when you work at 50% like this and all these little extra values start to occur, you start to get some, I think Bob Ross called them happy mistakes, and they start to create a conversation and a narrative with you for the painting for how you should approach and think through some of these sections. You start to see things that just tell you a little bit more about the story on what this landscape is going to be. All right, so there we go. We got some of our clouds that are starting to come together. Let's go ahead and get this one as well, and we got a tiny little fellow that I don't want to forget too. I think that the overall cloud formation that they have within the painting on the left-hand side right now is working quite a bit better. So I'm probably going to extend these cloud formations out. But for the sake of this demo, I want to show you what it looks like now to go back over these clouds a second time and start adding those highlights. So I'm going to take my sketch layer so you can actually see the highlights start to get drawn in, and bring my sketch down to 21%. So that's not too strong. I still should have my brush at 66% with a smoothing on there. And now I can start going back in and highlighting and detailing some of those clouds up. So what I'm thinking about here, I'm starting with this one that's kind of my middle of the road cloud. And I'm thinking about the lighting within my scene. So I always like to start, like I said, with the background within these pieces, because I end up learning so much about the overall design and structure of the painting, how the lighting is going to work, working with these cloud forms. This is the introduction to this stuff. So we're thinking about where that sunlight, which is coming from the right-hand side, is hitting my cloud structures. We'll put this cloud higher up in the air so that it's still getting a little bit of the highlight and the push. Let me just be accurate with the color schemes that I'm using. Yep, that's a little bit darker. Opacity is still at 66%, so I can make these brighter. You also have got the option, on sort of some of the fronts of these clouds, make some of these areas a little bit bigger. And I'm thinking about, what is the sort of mantle? What portion of this cloud is really getting all the lighting? Let's get up there. And back here, we've got still a little bit of a highlight, but it's not as much. So I'm working really loose and fast right now, and just starting to, have a conversation with this piece about what wants to get highlighted. And it looks very much like if you were just starting very loose with an acrylic painting or an oil painting on a canvas. Um, and we're just starting to block in some of these shapes. Now, all of this stuff needs refinement. This is something that I've talked about in the previous video, is how to be able to push past that sort of sketchy phase and get into the tighter detailing that really makes the painting come together and look a lot more polished and finalized and finished when you are done. Okay, so that's all looking pretty good. We've got a really big heat spot that's going on with my painting over here on the far left-hand side. I don't want to overdo it with these highlights right now. I think that there's still room for me to build and work my way into this section. But I just want to sort of set a quick visual reminder of what is the brightest area of this piece. All right, so now we're starting to get a nice gradient of color where I've got my bright spots. Let me turn this down, turn my brush up, my opacity down. Here we go. Getting a little messy here, but that's all right. Just want to go ahead and get some of those darker colors out of there. So I'm sort of creating a gradient and a heat spot within that section of the painting. Okay, so that's good first pass this on this section of it. I think some of the shape language in here is still pretty weak, especially with this brown cloud up in the top left-hand side. So that needs a little bit more polish, but let's continue working through. So the next step that I want to go in and knock out here is the mountains. And I'm looking for sort of the darkest color that's going on within my mountainscape. And for the mountains, I'm going to use that chip brush again, if I can find it. Chip brush works really nice for these, especially for mountainscapes. All right, so I'm still at 29%. Let's go ahead and commit to the full 100 here. I'm on a new layer also. I'm not working on the same layer that I was on previously. And we'll see if we can't do some color calculations based on the tones that I'm getting within the painting for how to be able to navigate the trees and all the other stuff that I want to include down there within my shot. But for now, we've got some snow and mountains that we can start to create on these guys. This is the fastest way. So I'm pulling my colors over there, and I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. We've got some nice snow going on the backside of this cliff face. I turn this down a little bit to where it's at like 64% again. So I can slowly start to build in some of my tones. And create that drop-off gradient as they start to disappear. So that's one of my mountaintops. A little bit more here. Again, just working really pretty quick. All right, we've still got highlights that we're going to create on these mountains back here. That to dissipate down the line. And now let's go back and let's knock out those highlights on this mountain. We've also got highlights for the snow that I'm going to be creating, but we'll do that in just a minute. Come on, buddy. Good time for me to save. Ranger station. All right. There we go. There it is. All right, so now we got the highlights that are actually starting to show up on this mountain face. And I'm thinking about, again, my lighting coming from the left-hand side. And where is that actually hitting? These mountains. It's looking good. Section back here, I especially like the contrast that I'm getting with the dark cliff that I'm going to have within that section. Add some highlight, and we've got a little bit on this ridge right here. Right. So pretty quick, we're getting a mountain within our shot. We've got all this landscape that I'm going to be creating down here, and this is the part that I want to see if we can't finagle. Maybe I'll get some more of my colors within the space, especially these greens that are in shadow and greens within the foreground, and then I'll be in a good position. But next step is going to be blocking in those rocks within the foreground. We've got the mountains, the background. We've got our clouds sorted. 100 just for the beginning of this. I'm pulling my just an arbitrary dark color in this section. Chip brush, again, giving me some good, sharp, nature-esque edges. Now, this is all going to change quite a bit because we've got all that brightness that's going to occur there, but I just want to go ahead and block it off for now. And realistically, I could probably, at this point, well, I don't have it all enclosed. There we go. Select, modify, expand. I needed it to expand more than that, but that's okay. I'm not sure why it gave me those weird edges there, but that's okay. So let's keep on pushing forward within the painting. And once we've got a base shadow color, I want to continue to work into my shadow section and get that a little better defined. There's definitely some more work that I can do within this section of it. But the next thing I would do is go in and just start silhouetting out where I want my ranger station to be. And you can see, I think you're starting to get the rhythm here. So I'm picking my base color. I'm going to go back, work those shadows a little bit more, refine once I get all my base colors in there, I'll start with my background again, and then I'll give a little bit more refinement to the clouds back there and start to make them really come together and look quite a bit stronger. All right, so for right now, you guys, I'm going to stop this particular demo, and good luck to y'all. Can't wait to see what it is that you're going to be creating for your background and environment pieces. Don't forget to add the human element in there or the ruins. And please, please, please work towards polished works. All right. See you soon.